Welcome to Unshakable Serenity. Today, we are not just starting another video on Stoic philosophy. We are about to unlock ancient codes within your mind, codes that for millennia have guided human beings to authenticity even in the midst of chaos. By the end of this journey, you will not be the same person who started watching. A subtle but profound transformation will have occurred. Have you ever wondered why, even though you try to follow all the advice to improve your mental health, you still feel like something is missing? Like a part of you is dormant or lost. The ancient Stoic philosophers discovered that this emptiness arises when we're not true to our true nature, when we live to please others, to live up to external expectations, or when we simply don't know who we really are. Stoicism is not just another dusty philosophy in the history books. It is a mental technology developed more than 2,300 years ago on the streets of Athens by Zeno of Citium and later refined by giants of thought such as Seneca, one of the most powerful men in Rome, Epictetus, who lived as a slave before becoming one of the greatest teachers in antiquity, and Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor who ruled the world by day and wrote profound reflections by candlelight at night. These men in different eras and radically different social circumstances came to the same conclusions about how to live well. Being true to yourself is not a luxury or an indulgence. It is the most fundamental human need. When we neglect this truth, we create the breeding ground for anxiety, depression, and toxic relationships. What you'll learn today isn't just superficial self-help techniques. These are principles that have been tested over millennia and have remained relevant to the fall of empires, technological revolutions, and profound cultural transformations. Why? Because they touch the unchanging essence of the human experience. Throughout this video, we will explore 10 fundamental aspects of Stoic authenticity. We will begin with deep self-knowledge, the foundation of everything. We will learn what it means to live in accordance with our essential nature. We will develop our capacity for conscious choice. We will master the art of focusing only on what is within our control. We will practice daily self-examination. We will discover techniques for resisting social pressure. We will experience what the Stoics called ataraxia, true peace of mind. We will learn to differentiate our fleeting impulses from our authentic needs. We will overcome the paralyzing fear of judgment from others. And finally, we will see how our personal authenticity connects us deeply with all humanity. If you've been struggling with anxiety, feeling overwhelmed by the expectations of others, or simply seeking a more authentic and peaceful way to live, the following words have been preserved through the centuries especially for you. The ancient Stoics spoke of an inner daimon, a divine spark that resides within every human being and seeks expression through our authentic actions. Today, we're going to awaken that daimon within you. Brace yourself. We are about to embark on a journey that began on the streets of Athens more than 2 millennia ago, passed through the imperial chambers of Rome, survived through manuscripts stored in medieval monasteries, inspired scientific and philosophical revolutions, and now comes to you, exactly at the moment when you need these lessons most. The codes for an authentic life are about to be revealed. And remember, by the end of this journey, something fundamental in you will have changed forever. Before we start, subscribe to the channel to strengthen our community and continue receiving content. Okay? First lesson. The importance of self-knowledge. Know thyself. These 3 words, engraved on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi more than 2,500 years ago, represent the foundation not only of Stoicism, but of every human journey toward authenticity. For the Stoics, it was not just philosophical advice. It was an existential imperative. Think about the last time you felt completely lost, as if you were living a life that didn't belong to you. That sense of profound disconnection has a simple but devastating cause. We are out of alignment with our true nature because we don't know it well enough. Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of Rome's greatest philosophers, said, "The beginning of philosophy is the awareness of one's own weakness and ignorance of essential things." But be careful. Stoic self-awareness goes far beyond the superficial kind of introspection found in modern personality tests or in faddish personal development trends. The Stoics sought a radical kind of self-awareness that distinguished between our fleeting preferences and our fundamental values, between our momentary emotions and our essential nature. When Seneca, an advisor to the Emperor Nero, retired each night for his examination of conscience, he was not merely listing his mistakes. He was tracing the distance between his actions and his deepest essence. Before you go to sleep, he wrote, examine your day. What mistake have you committed today? What vice have you fought? In what respect have you improved? This is not an exercise in self-condemnation, but in self-illumination. Here's the first code we'll unlock today. Your mind contains two levels of self-knowledge. The first is superficial, your preferences, habits, and automatic reactions, often shaped by culture, upbringing, and trauma. The second, deeper level, contains your core values, your capacity for rationality, and your connection to something greater than yourself. It's this second level that the Stoics considered our true nature. You may be wondering, how do I discover this deeper level of self-knowledge? Let me share 3 practical Stoic exercises that can start you on that journey. First, the practice of the detached observer. Imagine observing your own thoughts and actions as if they were someone else's. What would you notice? What repetitive patterns emerge? What inconsistencies between words and actions would you spot? Marcus Aurelius practices constantly, as we see in his meditations. Observe yourself as if you were someone else, as a physician examines a patient. Second, the cosmic perspective technique. Imagine looking at your life from space, watching the planet Earth spin. From there, consider what really matters in your existence. What concerns seem insignificant from this perspective? What remains valuable even when viewed from this distance? This exercise reveals our most fundamental values. Third, reflection on death, the Stoic memento mori. Ask yourself, if I knew I would die in a year, how would I change my life today? The answers to this question reveal discrepancies between how we live and how we would really like to live, between our current life and our authentic life. For those who suffer from anxiety, this deep self-awareness offers surprising relief. Often, our anxiety arises precisely from this internal misalignment. We are constantly trying to be someone we are not, pursuing goals that do not resonate with our essential nature, or fearing losing things that, deep down, we do not even really value. Epictetus said, do not seek to make things happen as you wish, but will them happen as they happen, and your life will flow smoothly. This is not a passive surrender, but a clear-headed acceptance that is only possible when we truly know ourselves. When we know what we truly value, we stop worrying about the rest. Self-knowledge is not an end in itself. It is merely the first step toward a life aligned with our essential nature, what the Stoics call living in accordance with nature. Knowing ourselves is important, but living in accordance with that knowledge is what truly transforms our existence. Second lesson, living in accordance with nature. The phrase to live in accordance with nature, in Latin, secundum naturam, echoes through Stoic texts like an essential refrain. But what exactly did the Stoics mean by this? It was certainly not a call to abandon civilization and live in the forest, nor a simple exhortation to follow primitive impulses. The concept is much deeper and potentially revolutionary for those seeking authenticity in a world that constantly pulls us away from ourselves. For the Stoics, our nature has 2 fundamental aspects. First, we are an integral part of the cosmos, an ordered, rational universe. Second, our distinctively human capacity is rationality. Not just calculated intelligence, but the ability to understand, discern, choose wisely, and live virtuously. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, defined the goal of life as living consistently, a harmony between our beliefs, values, words, and actions. His disciple Cleanthes later expanded the definition to living in accordance with nature. Note, for the Stoics, internal consistency and alignment with our essential nature are virtually synonymous. Let's unlock a second mindset today. When you feel fragmented within, when your actions contradict your deepest values, when you say yes externally while something inside you screams no, you are living against your nature. This internal contradiction is a huge source of psychological suffering that the Stoics identified millennia before modern psychology. Marcus Aurelius, in his moment of solitude as Emperor of Rome, wrote to himself, "Do not be distracted. In every action, ask yourself, how does this relate to me? Will I regret it? I will soon be dead, and everything will be gone. What else do I seek than to use my rational mind for the common good and in harmony with nature. Note the depth of this reflection. The most powerful emperor in the world, who could have any material thing he desired, recognized that he would only find peace by living in harmony with his rational nature and contributing to the common good. This is Stoic authenticity. But how do we distinguish behaviors that are aligned with our nature from those that are not? The Stoics offered us some practical pointers. First, take note of your energy levels. Activities that align with our essential nature tend to energize us, even when they're challenging. Activities that contradict our nature leave us feeling exhausted and drained, even when they seem easy. Second, examine the durability of your satisfaction. Actions that are aligned with our nature produce lasting and deep satisfaction. Impulsive behaviors, or those motivated only by external pressure, generate, at best, a fleeting pleasure followed by emptiness. Third, evaluate the quality of your thoughts after your choices. Authentic actions generate mental clarity and tranquility, while misaligned actions produce rationalization, over-justifications, and inner turmoil. Imagine someone who chooses a prestigious career simply to impress others, ignoring his or her natural inclinations. The Stoics would say that this person is living against nature, not just against his or her individual disposition, but against the rational principle that should guide human choices. The inevitable result will be chronic dissatisfaction, anxiety, and a persistent sense of imposture. For those struggling with mental health issues, the Stoic principle offers an eye-opening perspective. Anxiety and depression are often signs that we are living out of step with our essential nature. They are internal alarm bells, not enemies to be silenced with medication alone, but messengers that deserve to be heard and understood. Cleanthes, an early Stoic, wrote, "Lead me, Zeus and you, fate, wherever you bid me go. I will follow without hesitation. But even if I become reluctant, a wicked man, I must still follow." There's profound wisdom here. Living against our nature is possible, but costly. We can resist the call of authenticity for a time, but eventually the psychological toll becomes unbearable. And this price is particularly high when our capacity for conscious choice, what Epictetus called proeresis, remains underdeveloped. It is precisely this power of inner choice, this capacity for autonomous discernment, that we will explore in the next lesson, where we will discover how to cultivate the faculty that makes us truly human and potentially free. Third lesson, the concept of proeresis. There's a term in ancient Greek that Epictetus used constantly in his teachings, a word so central to Stoicism that it is surprising how relatively unknown it remains today. Proeresis, often translated as faculty of choice or moral will. This word represents a concept much richer and deeper than any translation can capture. It is essentially our ability to evaluate impressions, to discern between appearances and reality, and to choose our responses with inner autonomy. Here is the third mental code we're going to unlock. Within you is a capacity for choice that remains free regardless of external circumstances. This capacity cannot be controlled by anyone but yourself. As Epictetus, who lived as a slave, said, "You can chain my body but not my mind." In his Conversations, Epictetus explains, "Zeus said to me, 'Epictetus, I wish you to have not only the being I have given you, but also the faculty of proeresis. This is the only thing in you that is yours. Use it well, and you will need nothing else. Use it badly, and you will encounter obstacles, sorrow, disturbance, not because of others, but because of this faculty.'" For the Stoics, proeresis is our true self, not our body, possessions, reputation, or even our instinctual emotions. It is our ability to choose how to interpret what happens to us and how to respond to it. It is through the development of this faculty that we become truly autonomous and authentic. How does this translate to our practical lives, especially when we struggle with anxiety or depression? Consider the following Stoic exercise. The next time you feel anxiety coming on, pause. Take a deep breath and tell yourself, "This is just an impression, fantasia. I don't have to automatically agree with it." This simple act of pausing creates a space between the stimulus, the anxiety-provoking situation, and your response. In this space lies your proeresis, your inner freedom. Epictetus described this process in 3 steps. First, recognize the impression for what it is, just an impression, not necessarily reality. Second, withdraw assent. Temporarily suspend your automatic judgment about the situation. Third, apply the canon of truth. Rationally evaluate whether to accept, reject, or modify this impression. Many of us live our lives reacting automatically to situations without exercising this internal muscle of discernment. As a result, we live at the mercy of our initial impressions, often distorted by fears, past conditioning, or internalized narratives that we have not even consciously chosen. The Stoic distinction between automatic reactions and deliberate choices is crucial. When someone criticizes us, the automatic reaction might be defensiveness or hostility, but our proeresis allows us to choose. We can consider whether there is truth in the criticism, respond with curiosity rather than anger, or simply recognize that this person's opinion need not define our worth. To strengthen your proeresis, try this exercise for a week before each significant decision. Ask yourself, am I choosing this consciously, or am I just reacting out of habit, fear, or to please others? This simple question activates your faculty of choice, taking it out of automatic mode. Another powerful exercise is contemplation of alternatives. When you feel compelled to react in a certain way, pause and consciously visualize 3 possible alternative responses. Even if you end up choosing your initial reaction, the act of contemplating alternatives strengthens your proeresis. The connection between a well-developed proeresis and mental health is profound. Many modern therapies, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, are essentially based on the same principle. We can learn to identify automatic thoughts, question their validity, and choose more balanced and constructive interpretations. For the Stoics, however, developing proeresis goes beyond symptom relief. It is the key to a fully authentic life. When we become masters of this inner faculty, we stop living as puppets of external events, in Epictetus's words, and begin to live from our authentic center. And this leads us naturally to the next pillar of Stoic authenticity, clearly understanding what is within our control and what is not, the famous dichotomy of control, which we will explore below. For our proeresis can only be exercised fully when applied to the things that truly depend on us. Fourth lesson, the dichotomy of control. Some things are within our control, while others are not. Within our control are opinion, choice, desire, aversion, and, in a word, everything that is our own action. Not within our control are body, property, reputation, office, and, in a word, everything that is not our own action. With these words, Epictetus begins his handbook, Enchiridion, one of the most concise and powerful texts of Stoic philosophy. It is no coincidence that he begins with this fundamental distinction. The dichotomy of control is not just another philosophical concept among many others. It is the operational basis of all Stoic practice and an essential foundation for an authentic life. Here is the fourth mindset we will unlock today. Most human suffering comes from applying our energy and concern to things that are fundamentally beyond our control, while neglecting those things that are truly within our control. For the Stoics, this confusion is the root of the chronic anxiety, recurring frustration, and feelings of powerlessness that plague so many of us. When we passionately desire to control the uncontrollable, other people's opinions, external events, future outcomes, we enter a state of constant conflict with reality. But when we focus our energy exclusively on what is within our control, our own choices, judgments, intentions, and actions, we experience extraordinary inner freedom. Let's examine how this dichotomy applies to our search for authenticity. Imagine someone who constantly shapes his or her behavior to gain external approval. This person invests enormous emotional resources in trying to control something fundamentally uncontrollable, the opinions of others. The inevitable result is chronic anxiety, because even when he or she gains momentary approval, he or she can never guarantee its continuation. More importantly, by focusing his or her energy on the uncontrollable, this person neglects to develop his or her inner character, the very thing that truly depends on him or her. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Do not worry about what does not depend on you." This seemingly simple phrase contains profound wisdom. When we stop wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable, we recover our inner autonomy and reconnect with our essence. The dichotomy of control is not a call to passivity or indifference to the world. On the contrary, it is an invitation to act more effectively, focusing our energy where it can really make a difference. The Stoic does not say, "It doesn't matter what happens." He says, It matters most how I choose to respond to what happens. Here's a practical exercise to apply this principle. On a sheet of paper, draw a vertical line creating 2 columns. In the first, list all the things that are currently worrying you. In the second, classify each item as in my control, partially in my control, or out of my control. For each item that is partially or out of your control, identify the specific aspect that depends solely on you. For example, if you're worried about a job interview, you can't control whether you'll be hired. It depends on a number of external factors. But you can control your preparation, punctuality, honesty, and the way you present your qualifications. By focusing solely on these aspects, you not only reduce your anxiety, but you also maximize your chances of success. For those who struggle with anxiety, the dichotomy of control offers immense relief. Much of anxiety stems from this very confusion. We try to control the uncontrollable while neglecting what is truly within our control. When we clarify this distinction, many fears lose their power over us. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl, deeply influenced by Stoicism, expressed this principle memorably. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. This distinction is also fundamental to authenticity. When we stop trying to control how others see us and focus on living according to our inner values, we experience a rare inner coherence. Our lives cease to be a constant negotiation with external expectations and become the direct expression of our essential nature. But how can we regularly assess whether we are living in accordance with this dichotomy? How can we check whether our concerns, desires, and actions are aligned with what is truly up to us? This is where the next pillar of Stoic authenticity comes in. Daily examination of conscience, a practice that has transformed the lives of countless individuals over the centuries and which we will explore below. Fifth lesson, the daily examination of conscience. As the sun set over ancient Rome, Seneca, imperial advisor and one of the most influential Stoics, had an unvarying ritual. No matter how exhausting his day in the courts or in the palace, he would set aside a sacred moment for himself before bed. In his own words, "When the light goes out and my wife, already accustomed to my custom, is silent, I examine my whole day and review my actions and words. I hide nothing from myself. I overlook nothing. Why should I fear any of my mistakes when I can say, 'See that you do not do it again, now I forgive you'?" This daily examination of conscience, premeditatio in Latin, was not a simple recapitulation of events, but a ritual of moral and existential self-alignment. It is one of the most powerful Stoic practices and, curiously, one of the most neglected in modernity, despite its immense transformative potential. Here's the fifth code we'll unlock today. Consistency between your values and your actions can only be maintained through regular, deliberate review. Without this conscious examination, we inevitably stray from our authentic path, often without realizing it. Marcus Aurelius practiced his own morning examination, preparing himself for the day's challenges. In the morning, when you have difficulty getting up, keep this thought ready. I am getting up to do the work of a human being. In the evening, he reviewed whether his actions had lived up to this intention. What makes the Stoic examination of conscience so special? Unlike many other reflective practices, it does not seek to generate guilt or self-condemnation, but rather clarity and alignment. It is not an exercise in perfectionism, but in constant progress. As Epictetus warned, remember that you are not merely trying to attain a position or complete a reading, but to become a human being. Here is a practical guide to implementing this powerful Stoic tool in your life. First, set aside a fixed time, ideally before bed, when your mind is still active but your body is relaxing. Create a conducive environment. Reduce distractions, dim the lights. Find a comfortable position. Then review your day chronologically, not as a harsh judge, but as a curious and compassionate observer. Ask yourself, at what times were my actions aligned with my deepest values? When have I allowed external pressures to divert me from what I hold true? What opportunities did I have to exercise virtue, and how did I respond to them? What mistakes did I make, and how could I act differently in similar situations in the future? The Stoics had specific questions that we can adapt. Have I been courageous when necessary? Have I been fair in my interactions? Have I demonstrated moderation in my desires? Have I acted wisely in my choices? To make the exercise even more powerful, try writing it down as Marcus Aurelius did. Writing forces a clarity that thought alone cannot always achieve. You don't need an elaborate journal. A few brief notes about your main observations may suffice. Here is a crucial element that sets Stoic reflection apart from other forms of reflection. It ends with a specific commitment to the future. It is not enough to identify misalignments. It is essential to formulate concrete intentions for tomorrow. As Seneca suggested, I will judge again, and then I will forgive myself, if I deserve it. For those suffering from anxiety or depression, this practice offers profound additional benefit. It interrupts the cycle of unconstructive negative rumination, replacing it with structured, solution-oriented reflection. The difference is subtle but crucial. We're not just thinking about our problems over and over again, but analyzing them methodically to identify what we can learn and how we can improve. Modern psychological studies confirm the effectiveness of this approach. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which shares many principles with Stoicism, uses similar techniques of self-observation and cognitive reorientation, with proven results for anxiety disorders and depression. Daily self-examination allows us to detect when we are straying from our authenticity due to social pressure, precisely the topic of our next chapter. Because, as we will see, one of the greatest threats to our fidelity to ourselves is the power we allow the opinions of others to exert over our choices and behaviors. As we practice this self-alignment ritual regularly, we begin to notice something remarkable. Misalignments become more apparent in the moment they occur, not just during our nightly reflection. We develop a kind of authenticity sensor that alerts us immediately when we are about to compromise our core values. It is as if the soul-searching gradually expands the entire day, transforming into an ongoing awareness of our choices and their motivations. And it is precisely this expanded awareness that prepares us to face one of the greatest challenges to authenticity, the constant pressure to conform to external expectations, a topic we will explore next. Sixth lesson, resisting social pressure. Get used to being ignored about your opinions. What goes on in someone else's mind? It's none of your business. If people talk bad about you or plan some evil against you, what does it matter? You should accept them as they are. These words from Marcus Aurelius, written nearly 2,000 years ago, touch a raw nerve for many of us today. Our devastating vulnerability to the opinions of others. The philosopher-emperor, who held the most powerful office in the known world, still struggled with this vulnerability, a testament to the universality of this human challenge. Before we tell you the sixth code that we're going to unlock in your mind, how about subscribing to our channel? That way, you won't miss any of the upcoming content. Here's the sixth mental code that we're going to unlock. The biggest threat to your authenticity is not external obstacles, but the almost irresistible tendency to shape your life according to the opinions of others. Why are we so vulnerable to this social pressure? The Stoics offer profound explanation. As social beings, we evolve with a fundamental need for belonging and acceptance. This need, essential for survival in ancient environments, becomes problematic in the complex modern social environment, where we often sacrifice our authenticity for external validation. Epictetus addressed this issue with characteristic bluntness. If you care about the opinion of others, you become their prisoner. This was not a condemnation of human social nature, but warning of its dangers when not managed by reason. Consider how this prison manifests itself in our everyday lives. We choose careers to impress others, not to satisfy our natural inclinations. We adopt opinions because they're popular, not because we believe them to be true, and we often stay in toxic situations out of fear of the judgment associated with change. The Stoics developed practical strategies to resist this pressure. Let's explore 5 of them. First, the premeditation of ridicule. Cato the Younger, famous for his uncompromising integrity, often wore clothes and colors considered extravagant for his time. When questioned, he explained that he was deliberately desensitizing himself to ridicule in order to strengthen his moral autonomy. You can practice a modern version of this exercise. Imagine yourself being criticized or ridiculed for an authentic choice you want to make. Visualize the experience in detail and notice how the mere anticipation often reduces its power over you. Second, the visualizing the opinion as something external technique. When you feel upset by criticism or worried about being judged, visualize the opinion as a physical object separate from you. Third, the practice of selective shame. The Stoics did not advocate the total absence of shame, but rather its selective application. Seneca wrote, "Be ashamed only of what deserves shame." Ask yourself, if I were the only person in the world, would I still feel ashamed of this behavior? If the answer is yes, shame can be a useful moral signal. If shame exists only because of the opinions of others, it is an obstacle to authenticity. Fourth, the exercise of multiple perspectives. When concerned about criticism, remember that different cultures and individuals have radically different standards. What is condemned in one setting may be celebrated in another. This relativization is not an invitation to moral relativism, but a way of deflating the absolute power we attribute to the opinions of our immediate social circle. Fifth, the universal observer technique. Imagine that your actions will be judged not by the transient standards of today's society, but by a rational, impartial observer from any time or place. This expanded perspective often reveals how arbitrary many of our social concerns are. For people struggling with social anxiety or excessive worry about judgment, these techniques offer more than just relief. They provide a path to liberation. Social anxiety is often fueled by the belief that other people's opinions have ultimate power over our worth. When we recognize that this belief is fundamentally false, we begin to reclaim our inner autonomy. In today's digital environment, where we are constantly exposed to social comparisons and instant feedback, these Stoic lessons become even more crucial. Every like, comment, or view can become a judge of our worth if we allow it. The Stoics will remind us that no external opinion, whether from 1,000 people or millions, has the power to define who we truly are. How can we apply these principles in challenging professional environments where conformity is often rewarded? Epictetus would suggest distinguishing between the external role and the inner self. We can meet the reasonable expectations of our role without compromising our inner integrity. The key is to recognize the difference between strategic adaptability and automatic compliance. As we develop this inner independence from the opinions of others, we begin to experience a rare and precious state of mind that the Stoics called ataraxia, the true peace of mind that comes when we free ourselves from external opinions as a source of validation. It is precisely this state of mind that we will discuss in the next chapter, exploring how authenticity creates unshakable inner peace. Seventh lesson, ataraxia, mental peace of mind. Imagine a perfectly calm lake on a windless morning. Its crystal clear surface perfectly reflects the mountains, trees, and blue sky. Nothing disturbs the serenity, no ripples, no distortions. This image captures what the Stoics called ataraxia, the deep mental tranquility that comes from living in harmony with oneself and nature. This Greek term, literally absence of disturbance, represented not just a philosophical concept, but a concrete, attainable state of mind. For the Stoics, ataraxia was not a passive or indifferent peace, but dynamic tranquility that remains stable even amid life storms. Here is the 7 mental code we will unlock. Genuine inner peace is impossible while we live in internal contradiction. When our actions align with our deepest values, we experience a tranquility that no external circumstance can destroy. Epictetus explained that tranquility comes when you live in accordance with nature. In other words, when you are authentically yourself, without trying to be what you are not or to possess what you do not need. It is a state that arises naturally from authenticity, not something that can be directly pursued. It is important to distinguish ataraxia from other forms of peace. It is not a state of euphoria or ecstatic happiness. Those are transient emotional states that the Stoics classified as passions, pathos. Nor is it emotional numbness or apathy in the modern sense. Stoic ataraxia is more like an internal stability, a balanced platform from which we can experience both joy and sadness without being overwhelmed by either. Seneca, who faced exile, political conspiracy, and eventually forced suicide, described ataraxia as the unalterable serenity of the mind, a state in which the mind finds itself in such a stable and elevated position that it is above the reach of anything external. It is not an escape from reality, but a different way of relating to it. How do we recognize when we are approaching this state? The Stoics offered several indicators. First, a reduction in the intensity of automatic emotional reactions. Not that we stop feeling joy or sadness, but these emotions no longer drive us to extremes or last longer than is natural. Second, a growing ability to observe our own thoughts and emotions without automatically identifying with them. Epictetus explained, "Remember that it is not he who insults or attacks you who offends you, but your opinion of them." This cognitive distance is characteristic of ataraxia. Third, a significant decrease in anxious worry about the future or rumination about the past. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Do not allow the future to disturb you, for you will meet it, if necessary, with the same reason you use to deal with the present." Fourth, a genuine acceptance of events beyond our control without passive resignation. Cleanthes, in his hymn to Zeus, expressed this attitude, "Lead me, God, and thou, fate, I will follow without hesitation." For those struggling with anxiety or depression, Stoic ataraxia offers a particularly valuable perspective. Many modern treatments focus on eliminating the symptoms of these conditions, while the Stoics invite us to transform our relationship to these symptoms. It's not that we'll never feel anxious again, but that anxiety will lose its defining power over us. How to cultivate ataraxia practically. Here are 3 Stoic exercises. First, the practice of viewing from above. Visualize yourself rising above your current situation, seeing it from afar, first from 100 yards, then from a mile, then from space. Notice how many of your worries seem to fade away with distance. This shift in perspective literally redefines what we find troubling. Second, the exercise of identification with the whole. For a few minutes each day, contemplate your connection with the entire universe. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Constantly consider the universe as a living organism, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being." This expansion of identity dissolves many disturbances based on self-centered concerns. Third, the accord with the present technique. Practice saying to yourself, "I choose this," to every situation you face, even difficult ones. Not as resignation, but as an acknowledgement that you choose your response. Epictetus advised, "Do not seek to make things happen as you wish, but will them happen as they happen, and your life will flow smoothly." It is crucial to understand that ataraxia does not mean abolishing desire or ambition. The Stoics distinguish between natural and necessary desires, which can be cultivated, and empty or artificial desires, which disturb our tranquility. Eighth lesson, authenticity versus impulses. Don't be swept away by the intensity of an impression. Instead, say, "Impression, wait for me a little while. Let me see what you are and what you stand for. Let me test you." With these words, Epictetus invites us to one of the most important distinctions for those seeking authenticity, the difference between our momentary impulses and our core values. In a world that often confuses authenticity with doing what you feel like doing, the Stoics offer us a much deeper and more liberating perspective. Here's the 8th mindset we're going to unlock today. Your authenticity doesn't reside in your fleeting impulses or desires, but in your stable values and your rational capacity for choice. Confusing impulses with authenticity is perhaps the biggest modern misunderstanding of what it means to be true to yourself. The Stoics made a crucial distinction between impressions, phantasiae, the automatic sensations, impulses, and reactions that arise in us, and judgments, hypolepsis, our conscious evaluations of those impressions. The authentic self, for the Stoics, lies not in the initial impressions, but in the ability to evaluate them rationally. Seneca explained that many desire harmful things either by habit or by mistake. An alcoholic may feel a genuine desire for drink, but it would be misleading to call this urge authentic or suggest that following it is being true to oneself. The Stoics would argue that true authenticity lies in recognizing and acting on what truly serves our development as rational beings. How can we practically distinguish between genuine desires and fleeting impulses? The Stoics offer us several tools. First, the cognitive pause technique. When you feel a strong urge, practice deliberately creating a space between the stimulus and your response. Take a deep breath and ask, is this urge aligned with my core values, or is it just a conditioned reaction? This brief pause can prevent countless actions that we would later regret. Second, the consistency over time test. Ask yourself, Has this desire been consistent over the months or years, or is it a momentary passion? Desires that are aligned with our essential nature tend to persist, while transient impulses fluctuate with external circumstances. Third, the analysis of inner consequences. Evaluate the desire not only by its external consequences, but by its effect on your character. As Epictetus asked, what kind of person will this desire or action make me? Genuine desires strengthen us internally, while misaligned impulses gradually weaken our character. Fourth, the exercise of decomposition. Examine the object of your desire into its constituent parts, removing emotional associations. Marcus Aurelius often practiced this. For wine, it is fermented grapes. For luxurious clothes, it is animal fibers dyed with the blood of shellfish. For fame, it is volatile opinions. This demystification often reveals the illusory nature of many desires. For those struggling with compulsive behaviors or addictions, the Stoic distinction between drives and authentic values is particularly valuable. Recovery from any addiction begins precisely when we recognize that the drive for immediate gratification does not represent our true selves, but rather a temporary distortion of our will. Likewise, for those who suffer from social anxiety, this perspective can be revolutionary. Often, social avoidance behaviors are driven by momentary fears that, while intense, do not represent our deeper values of connection and communication. Recognizing these impulses as not self is the first step toward reclaiming our social authenticity. It is important to note that the Stoics were not radical ascetics who condemned all pleasure or desire. They distinguished between desires that were natural and necessary, such as nutritious food, natural but not necessary, such as gourmet foods, and unnatural and not necessary, such as fame or excessive wealth. Only the last category was considered incompatible with tranquility and authenticity. A modern example can illustrate this distinction. Compulsively comparing our lives to others on social media can generate desires that are neither natural nor necessary, desires for external validation, status, or possessions that do not reflect our essential nature. These desires, though they may seem intense in the moment, often distance us from our authentic selves. Epictetus suggested a daily practice. Before you take any action, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve by doing this? Will I regret it? I'll be dead soon and none of this will matter. This simple self-inquiry can quickly reveal when we're being driven by impulses that are out of alignment with our core values. This distinction between authenticity and impulses naturally leads us to the next challenge on the journey to authenticity. How to overcome our deeply ingrained fear of being judged when we finally choose to follow our true nature rather than fleeting impulses or external pressures. Lesson 9. Overcoming the fear of judgment. Other people have the right to sing, dance, and play music, but if I have water to drink, have the right to be satisfied. Do any of them sing well? I need not worry about that. The crow does not sing, but the nightingale does. Should I therefore regret that I am not a nightingale? This reflection by Epictetus reveals one of the most profound freedoms that the Stoics sought. Freedom from fear of being judged by others. Perhaps no other fear is as universal or as limiting to our authenticity as the terror of being judged, ridiculed, or rejected for who we really are. Here is the 9th mindset we will unlock. The judgment of others has no inherent power to hurt us. Only our judgment of that judgment can cause us suffering. Understanding this truth unlocks an extraordinary capacity to live authentically. The Stoics recognized fear of judgment as one of the greatest barriers to authenticity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste the rest of your life worrying about what other people think." That means no longer living up to your own nature, which is made for rational and social action. This fear is not irrational from an evolutionary perspective. As social beings, we have historically depended on group acceptance for survival. Rejection could mean death. But in our current society, this ancestral fear often becomes disproportionate and paralyzing. The Stoics developed specific techniques to overcome this fear. Let's explore 5 of the most powerful. First, the practice of adversity premeditation, premeditatio malorum, applied to social judgment. Deliberately visualize specific scenarios where you're criticized, ridiculed, or rejected for being true to yourself. Imagine these scenarios in vivid detail. This exercise gradually desensitizes your fear and reveals that the feared consequences are rarely as devastating as we imagine. Second, the impartial observer exercise. When you fear judgment, ask yourself, how would a completely impartial observer, with no personal involvement, view the situation? This perspective often reveals that the feared judgment is based on arbitrary standards or standards that are irrelevant to your core values. Third, the technique of cosmic insignificance. Marcus Aurelius often remarked, how quickly everything disappears, bodies in the universe, and their memories in time. When we place our fears of judgment in the perspective of the vastness of the cosmos and the flow of time, their power diminishes dramatically. Fourth, the exercise of contradictory opinions. Remember that for every person who might negatively judge your authenticity, there is someone who would admire it. Human opinions are inherently contradictory to one another. Why, then, give absolute authority to any one of them? Fifth, the practice of inner fortitude. The Stoics viewed the mind as a citadel that can remain impenetrable regardless of external attacks. Marcus Aurelius advised, withdraw into yourself. The rational part has the natural ability to make itself sufficient and to need nothing external when it is satisfied with its own righteousness. Cato the Younger offers an inspiring historical example of this freedom of judgment. When criticized for going barefoot and wearing plain clothes, practices considered unbecoming of a Roman senator, he replied, "It is better that they ask why I have no statue than why I have one." His authenticity not only withstood criticism, but eventually inspired admiration. For those suffering from social anxiety, these Stoic techniques can complement modern therapeutic approaches. Cognitive behavioral therapy often works on the same premise. It's not external events, like judgment, that upset us, but our interpretations of those events. A practical application. The next time you feel fearful of judgment, practice what Epictetus called impression analysis. Ask yourself, does this opinion have power over me? Can it affect my inner character? Can it force me to do something against my will? The Stoic answer is clear. No external opinion has that power unless you give it to it yourself. At the same time, it is important to distinguish between fear of judgment and constructive feedback. The Stoics valued growth and correction of mistakes. Epictetus encourages students to receive corrections with gratitude. The difference lies in intention and how we receive feedback, as a threat to our worth or as an opportunity for growth. As we gradually free ourselves from the fear of judgment, we begin to experience one of the greatest joys of authenticity, the ability to genuinely contribute to common good without seeking approval or fearing disapproval. It is precisely this connection between individual authenticity and social responsibility that we will explore in the next chapter. 10th lesson, authenticity and the common good. Human beings are born to help each other. As hands help hands, feet help feet, upper teeth help lower teeth. Acting against each other is contrary to nature. These words from Marcus Aurelius lead us to one of the most profound and potentially surprising dimensions of Stoic authenticity. Its intrinsically social and communal nature. For the Stoics, being true to oneself never meant self-centered isolation or an exclusive pursuit of self-fulfillment. On the contrary, it meant recognizing and living in accordance with our fundamentally social nature. Here is the 10th and final mindset we will unlock. Your deepest authenticity does not separate you from others, but connects you to them in a more meaningful and genuine way. To be truly yourself is also to recognize your belonging to the human community. The Stoics developed the concept of oikiosis, a difficult-to-translate term that combines notions of appropriation and familiarity. Initially, each living being has oikiosis within itself. It recognizes and values its own constitution. But in human beings, this faculty naturally expands to include others. First our immediate family, then friends, community, nation, and eventually all of humanity. Hierarchos, a lesser-known Stoic philosopher, illustrated this concept with the image of concentric circles. The innermost circle represents the self, the neighbor, the family, then friends, community, country, and finally, the outermost circle encompasses all of humanity. The Stoics' moral goal was to pull the circles inward, to treat those in the outermost circles with the same care we give to those closest to us. For the Stoics, This expansion concern was not an abstract moral obligation, but the natural expression of our deepest authenticity. As Seneca wrote, nature has produced us related, for she created us from the same source and for the same ends. How can we apply this concept in practice in our search for authenticity? The Stoics suggest several approaches. First, the exercise of common humanity. When interacting with anyone, no matter how different they may seem from you, remind yourself, this person is a human being too, with hopes, fears, pains, and joys like mine. This simple contemplation dissolves the illusion of separation that often prevents us from being authentic in relationships. Second, practice selfless service. Look for opportunities to contribute to the common good without seeking recognition. Marcus Aurelius compared this behavior to a vine that produces grapes without asking for thanks, or a bee that makes honey without fanfare. This selfless action is a pure expression of authenticity. Third, exercise your social nature. When making important decisions, ask yourself, does this choice consider only my interests, or does it also consider the common good? The Stoics believe that truly authentic actions would naturally consider both, with no fundamental conflict between them. For those struggling with anxiety and depression, this perspective offers profound additional benefit. Modern psychological research repeatedly confirms that contributing to the well-being of others is one of the most powerful antidotes to psychological distress. As Seneca observed, no person can live happily if he considers only himself, if he turns everything into a question of his own advantage. You must live for others if you wish to live for yourself. It is crucial to understand that the social dimension of authenticity does not mean conformity or self-sacrifice. The Stoics clearly distinguish between social conformity, which can compromise our integrity, and social contribution, which expresses it. As Epictetus emphasized, remember that you are an actor in a play, of whatever kind the director chooses. Your job is to play the part assigned to you well, but to choose it is someone else's job. How does this concept apply to the modern challenge of authenticity? Consider a person who has discovered his or her calling to teach children, but is hesitant to pursue it because of relatively low social status or pay. The Stoic perspective would suggest that pursuing this calling would not only honor his or her individual authenticity, but would also fulfill his or her social nature, a dual and integrated expression of fidelity to self. Or consider someone suffering from social anxiety who avoids interactions for fear of judgment. The Stoics would suggest that reconnecting with others, not out of external obligation, but out of recognition of our interconnected nature, can be both an expression of authenticity and a path to healing. Epictetus summed up this integrated view when he said, "In everything you do, remember to turn to yourself and ask, what is my part in this? How can I act in accordance with nature? How can I serve the community?" For the Stoics, these questions were not in conflict. They were complementary aspects of the same fundamental authenticity. As we practice this integrated vision, we begin to experience what the Stoics consider the ripest fruit of authenticity, a life where our actions emanate naturally from our authentic center and simultaneously benefit the larger community. There is no division, no internal conflict. There is only the fluid, integrated expression of who we truly are. And it is with this integrated vision that we will conclude our exploration of the Stoic lessons on being true to oneself. Synthesizing the 10 codes we have unlocked to reveal a holistic path toward full authenticity. We've reached the end of our journey through the Stoic principles of authenticity. But in reality, we're just at the beginning of a new phase in your own life. As promised at the beginning, something fundamental within you has already begun to change. The 10 codes we've unlocked throughout this video are not just abstract ideas. They're keys to a profound transformation in your relationship with yourself and the world. In Stoic philosophy, being true to oneself is not a matter of whim or indulgence, but of deep alignment with nature and reason. The Stoics believe that each person possesses a spark of universal reason, an inner logos that, when followed, leads us to virtue and peace. Imagine your true self as an internal compass. When we act against our essential nature, we feel tension and disharmony. When we are true to our essence, even in the face of difficulties, we experience a serenity that no external circumstance can disturb. Seneca wrote that the greatest wealth is to live content with little. This contentment comes not from possessions or favorable circumstances, but from living in accordance with nature and the values we recognize as true. The Stoic path does not promise ease, but integrity. Epictetus, who lived as a slave, teaches us that even when we cannot control external events, we always have autonomy over our attitudes and judgments. This is true freedom. Being true to yourself doesn't mean rejecting change or growth. On the contrary, it means honestly acknowledging where we're falling short and working tirelessly to align our actions with our highest ideals. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote daily, "Do not waste the rest of your life thinking about what other people think. Be true to your purpose." This is perhaps the most valuable lesson of Stoicism, that our lives are brief, and every moment spent being less than we can be is a moment wasted. May you find the courage to be authentically who you are, accepting what you cannot change, transforming what you can, and cultivating the wisdom to know the difference. In this fidelity to yourself lies the path to a life well lived. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and comment on what you thought of the content. This way, you strengthen our support network and encourage us to bring you more inspiring content like this. Hugs, and see you later.